Welcome to the Jerry Bovino Show. And now, here's Jerry.
Jerry Bovino, we're back with usual Aspen politics. We've got the gadfly extraordinaire, Maurice Emmer, fresh from the West End, in to tell us about his mayoral candidacy. We hope to get some other of the candidates on over the next couple of weeks before our election. But Maurice has been active in local debate, and we are happy to have you on the show.
And thank you for the moniker, Jerry.
Yeah,
That's
there
terrific.
You go.
Yeah.
The gadfly extraordinaire.
Yeah,
we may have to have a little.
I've been looking for a campaign slogan.
Yeah.
That might be a good one.
It's as good as any.
I was thinking about Emmer. He graduated from high school. You know, something like that, right?
That's all you
Yeah.
need.
He turned in his term papers.
That's something. So, now give us your background, Maurice. Tell us how you got here.
Well, my wife actually started this whole thing when she was about 5 years old, and her family would come here every summer. We weren't married then, though. And this was their summer retreat. You know, when I say retreat, they stayed in little windowless cabins on the west end of town, and that was their summer vacation. They'd drive up from Oklahoma City. They would spend a couple of weeks. My father-in-law would fish. My mother-in-law would go to the music and pick flowers when it was okay to pick flowers.
If you kept doing that today, you'd still be perfect.
Yeah. So as soon as we were married 41 years ago, she said, hey, let's go to Aspen. And she dragged me here in the summer. And of course, it was the only time she ever had to drag me here because I had never been to Aspen before. But that's 41 years ago. And we've been coming ever since. And
where were you living in Oklahoma City?
We both grew up in Oklahoma City. We went to college outside Oklahoma, and then we went to Chicago for law school and L.A. to work.
Your wife's an attorney also?
She's an estate planning lawyer.
Okay,
yeah.
well,
she's retired and really glad
ask me how cold it was in Aspen last winter.
Okay, how cold was it?
So cold.
Yeah.
That when we walked out of the restaurants, the lawyers had their hands in their own pockets.
That's a good one. I got a number of those, but I can't tell them on your show because they're all, you know, pretty off color.
Yeah, okay, we'll hold those for the late
during
night.
during the commercial break.
We're still in family-oriented material here.
Okay.
Well, so you were an attorney, you also were a CPA, so you understand.
Yeah, I was a CPA. I am a CPA, but I haven't practiced as a CPA for a long time.
And so you can read a balance sheet, which might help us around here.
I'm not intimidated by it.
We spend money like a college freshman.
You know, we've got a 630-page annual budget for this city. 630 pages. So who do you think is going to dig into that?
We're going to talk about that. My joke around Aspen is we spend money here like a college freshman with her daddy's credit card.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
There's a funny story about my daughter when she went to college. You know, we had paid for college for her, and then we gave her some expense money, and then we gave her a credit card for emergencies, right?
Oh.
So the first month we get the credit card bill, and she had spent, and I'm not exaggerating, $500 on manicures and pedicures.
Well, those are emergencies.
So
when you need one, you need one.
I called her up and I said, Rachel, are you out of your mind? And she said, well, Dad, a girl has to look nice.
No,
I said, well, okay, that makes sense. That's ridiculous. Right. That's sort of the way we look at things in Aspen. So, okay, now politics.
Yeah.
I had a notion years ago to run for mayor when I started out like you, writing letters, and my wife definitely would never allow it. She said, it's easier to be a dart than a dartboard.
Yes, it's so true. Yeah.
So right now you're a dart. Tell us why you're interested in local Aspen
Well, I'm becoming
politics.
a dartboard pretty fast, yeah. And, you know, I don't think I was exclusively a dart even before I jumped into the race. Well, you know, one answer is it's a great way for my wife to get me out of the house.
Yeah,
right?
That's true.
Okay,
that's good.
Know, yeah. But I got interested. I never was involved in politics before, Jerry. But after we moved to Aspen full-time, about 3.5 years ago, we retired, and we'd had a home here for a number of years, and it was always our plan we would retire here. So we've had that interest in Aspen for a long time, that this would be where we lived, you know, lived out our golden years. And I just started noticing when I was here all the time how acrimonious the politics could get from time to time and how off point they were, that, you know, politics can be very emotional. And I just found that too often, at least for my taste, the debate wasn't focused on the issues. The debate was focused on personalities.
Right, we're the ad hominem capital of the world.
And I didn't think that was productive. So that got my attention. That's what got my attention. then eventually, I can't honestly tell you how I got involved in the Castle Creek Hydro project. But I believe it had to do with my asking some questions of the city and then not being satisfied with the answers.
You don't live on the river.
No,
so
I don't
it
live
wasn't
on.
a
We live
NIMBY.
just off Cemetery Lane.
Right, it
You know,
wasn't a NIMBY thing.
It has nothing to do with us personally. It's only us, me, as a citizen. And some of the answers didn't shake out for me. So, of course, then I would ask more questions, and eventually I came into contact with other people who had already been deeply involved in it for a long time, and that was the first political issue I ever was involved in. It was very eye-opening.
I started out way back when I first got to Aspen the first time, 40 years ago. They were arguing about the S-curves, believe it or not. So it's like things don't happen in a hurry here. We have generations.
Right.
It's like a Chinese 100-year war or something.
Right.
It just keeps going on and on.
Right.
So your first deal was hydro.
My first serious deal was hydro. Yeah, the thing I really dug into.
And was the problem with hydro from your perspective? Obviously, there are environmental concerns and a lot of things, but was the craziness of the economics, or what?
Well, the first thing that got my interest, being a kind of a numbers guy and a law and order guy, as a lawyer, law. What's the law? I always go back well, what's the law governing the situation? That gives us a grounding, and hopefully gives everybody something they can agree on. That is the law, and so we have to go from there. It was really the finances that got my attention at first, because the projections looked to me not to account for all the many risks that are attendant to a project like that. They projected results over 40 or 50 years, and to project results for anything like that beyond 10 years is pure guesswork, because so many facts can change. So I first was concerned that was the projection, that was the basis for representations to the voters, and yet they weren't sound representations in some ways as far as I was concerned. As I learned more about it, I began to appreciate the environmental aspects, which I hadn't even studied before. And then I realized that's at least as big an issue. And in fact, it was the environmental aspects on which we campaigned when we had a ballot issue.
Yeah, it was one of those schizophrenic issues in Aspen where the environmentalists fell on both sides of the fence. Because number one, we all want to find alternative energy sources to carbon fuels. And on the other hand, damming up rivers isn't the greatest thing in the world.
Right. But it's not even a river. I mean, these are streams. And I learned that streams have an ecosystem that goes way beyond the stream bed itself. They water all that vegetation around for hundreds of yards and so forth. So it's very delicate, and you have to be very careful what you do with it. That's
so it's fair to say, I mean, I don't really know anybody in Aspen who's not environmentally concerned. It's fair to say that as mayor, you would be concerned about the environment. There's not much debate about whether you're concerned about the environment. It was just on this issue.
Well, I don't doubt that some of my detractors would accuse me of caring nothing about the environment, but that would not be true, because no one would move to a town like Aspen for the rest of his life and not care about this beautiful, unique environment.
I agree.
It's just not logical.
I think if there is one thing that most Aspenites agree on, it's that we want to keep this a beautiful place. And then the debate comes, what are the constraints?
How do we
to
do it,
that?
and what are the other considerations, right?
Okay, so now you're getting involved in politics, start writing letters to the editor. It's just how I started, because it's like when you see nonsense, you want to speak up.
Right.
And then, but you sort of immediately put yourself in the fray, and did you receive personal attacks?
Oh, some, but I wouldn't call them really serious personal attacks. I know that when in fact, I had a colloquy with Carolyn Zachariason about this once, when something came up that somebody had written into their newspaper that I thought was particularly nasty. And she said, well, you started it, sort of, what do you expect? I mean, she wasn't being flip about it. She was being serious. If you're going to go out there, you have to expect people to push back, and they won't always be as polite as you might hope that they will be. It's not really a problem for me. I did get a couple of calls at the house from anonymous people. It might have been the same person, who knows. And that's off base. We live in a small town. We can debate vigorously. We all want to know who's saying what. But this kind of stuff, calling it home and making veiled threats, that's not good stuff.
I remember when my kids were in college, we bought a little, we don't live in the city, but we live in the county, but
Yeah.
when my kids, we bought this little tiny studio apartment in the Winfield Arms. It was barely 300 square feet, okay? It cost, at that time, almost nothing. And we didn't want them driving up and back, you know, if they were drinking, and they were in town
Sure.
with their friends and the college kids. And then when I wrote some letter to the editor, they found out that I had this second place under my name, you know,
Oh, sure.
and they said, he's a landlord.
Oh, that's horrible. Oh, my God, Jerry.
the worst.
We shouldn't have any of those.
No, no, no. So, all right, so let's hear what we're going to do. We're going to take a short break to recognize the underwriters who very generously support us here at GrassRoots Television. When we come back, we're going to get into some issues. Maurice is going to tell us why any logical person who has half a brain would want to run for any Aspen office. So we're going to thank U.S. Trust, the premium name in private wealth management, Bishop Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning, and the Bovino Law Firm, David Bovino and Summer Woodson-Berg. When we come back, we're going to get into Aspen issues. Stay with us.
Support for this Grassroots community television program comes from U.S. Trust. From wealth structuring to investment management, U.S. Trust's global perspective, unique team approach, fiduciary platform, and more than 200 years of experience provide for the kind of insights, solutions, and expertise that have a worth all their own.
Bishop Plumbing and Air Conditioning, serving Aspen and Vale for over 40 years. Shoe covers, name tags, IDs. Let Bishop worry about your heating, plumbing, and air conditioning issues so that you don't have to. Bishop Plumbing and Air Conditioning, 925-8610.
Vivino Law Firm, a boutique law firm specializing in complex litigation, real estate, leasing, and sales, corporate organization, trust, and estates. Admitted in Colorado, California, and New York. David Bovino and Summer Woodson at 970-925-4445 or www.bovinolaw.com.
Jerry Bovino, we're back with the usual Aspen politics with Maurice Emmer, the gadfly extraordinaire. And so, you know, I read all your stuff in the paper. First of all,
Well, thank you.
like me, I'm sure your favorite, the first thing you turn to in the paper are the letters.
Columns, then the letters.
Columns and the letters.
Right.
Whose column do you like?
Well, I like Roger's
I like Roger's,
column a lot, and I like Tony's column a lot.
Yeah.
And Sue's column's always very interesting, and the Princess.
Princess is fun.
Yeah, that's a very nice column.
What-
and Melanie Sturms.
Yeah.
She writes very thought-provoking
She
things.
does. The Princess, you know, I fell in love with the Princess. Allison, if you're watching, you know I love you.
Oh, hold on, I'm on GrassRoots TV, Paul Mentor's column.
Exactly.
Right,
Paul has a nice
right.
column.
Okay,
I
sorry.
fell in love with the Princess. This goes back when she first started. It had to be 10 or 12 years ago, maybe more. And she wrote a column, and it said, you know, I woke up this morning. You know how she writes? It's graphic and descriptive.
Yes.
She said, I woke up this morning, and it was a beautiful morning, and I looked outside. The sky was blue, and the birds were chirping, and the children were smiling. And she said, and I wondered what was different today than what was yesterday. And she said, I realized last night I got laid. So I said, I love this girl already,
right.
So, okay, so you're writing these letters to the editor, and since I write letters too, sometimes do you feel like you ought to just like back off and give yourself a rest for a few days?
Yeah,
or?
I do, and of course, sometimes people have said, you know, you're overexposed, and I probably am to some extent. But I don't write about just anything. There are a few things that really get to me, and I write when I'm motivated to write. So what really gets to me is when I see something in government that I think is just ignoring the law. And when representations are made by people about legal matters that are important legal matters, constitutional issues or what have you, that they know absolutely nothing about, and yet they do not shrink from expressing a view. Now, I have no objection to people expressing any point of view they want to, but to represent that this or that law says this when it says exactly the opposite, that bothers me.
What would be an example of an issue like that, other than the hydro question? What else can you see where the city government is playing fast and loose with the legislation?
Well, an example might have to do when we had our campaign over a year ago now. We had a petition campaign, Ward Hallenstein and I did, to repeal the zoning ordinance for Castle Creek Hydro. It was our first opportunity to do something political, take an action to push back against the project, because when the city council enacts an ordinance, the citizens have 30 days after that to petition the city either to withdraw the ordinance or put it on a public ballot. And we wanted it on a public ballot. In fact, I want a lot of stuff on public ballots.
Yeah, it's our town, right?
Yeah, it's our town. It's a small town. It's not that big a deal to have an election.
It's no big deal.
Yeah, we shouldn't shrink from having an
But
election.
whatever happens here is that whenever we have election that some of the politicians don't like, they just have another election 2 years later. That's what happens with the S-curve.
Yeah,
every 3 years.
I know, and that is a problem. That is a problem, and we'll never completely cure that problem. But I'd kind of like to see us move more in the direction of resolving issues and then moving on to other issues, and not, as you said, the S-curve was an issue 40 years ago.
We're still working on it. What do you think of the S-curves? You have to have a policy on that. A position?
Yeah, it should go to the voters. That's my position.
Okay, yeah,
I mean,
we've done
I don't
that
have a
so many
solution to
times.
it. You know, it's like a lot of things, Jerry. A lot of challenges, I wouldn't even call them issues, but challenges in the city, like the S-curve, like what's the future of affordable housing, how can we protect affordable housing, make it more rational going forward, make it more secure for the people who are in it and will be in it. These are issues that the voters ought to have an opportunity to weigh in on in an appropriate way, and by that I mean you can't have everything micromanaged by a public vote on everything. But on the other hand, you shouldn't just forge ahead on things forever and never let the public weigh in on it. So I think we need a lot more of that.
So in this example, I read your letters, and your letters come across, whether people agree with you politically, as very logical. I like someone who's logical. And the one thing I learned after these 4 decades being in and out of Aspen, it's hard to be logical here, because there's nothing logical about Aspen. It's like 2 square miles surrounded by reality.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, we're a very unique community. We're a special community, and we have something very valuable here as citizens of Aspen. It's something so unique. It's almost like a Shangri-La, really. You know, this special place in the mountains. But there are lots of people who do listen to logic, and one person's logic, the results of one person's logic, don't necessarily comport with the results of another person's logic. But I like to try to approach issues through some kind of logical progression rather than emotion. Emotion does not really, I know there's a lot of it around, isn't going to help us resolve issues.
Right. You know, in the beginning when I first got here, it's like I was frustrated by Mick. It like drove me crazy, because I thought, we had a one-party town, and dissent was like crushed, and like didn't want. Nah, Mick doesn't bother me that much anymore. Mick, if you're watching, it's like you don't bother me anymore. I'm like over it. And Mick has done some good things for Aspen, so I want to give you credit for that. It's just that we have a town where we should encourage a healthy political debate, and if anybody comes along with an idea that doesn't fit right into the council's North Star, then they're immediately attacked as being against somebody. And I want to read this. I want to read this letter that was in the paper yesterday, because I want to discuss. To me, this letter, which is a very nicely written letter by someone named Sam Rondo, who lives in Aspen. This letter is emblematic of what I see as the unnecessary adversarial and class warfare nature of what's evolved in Aspen. So it says, the title on this is Mayor Should Represent the Working Class. And it says, editor, just read in the paper today that Mr. Emmer, that's Maurice, is running for Aspen mayor. My question for Mr. Emmer is, what are you going to do for the working class of Aspen? You used to be a second homeowner here, right? How are you going to help me? I am someone who can't even fathom owning anything besides government housing, and the Aspen Skiing Company won't pay a wage that could afford a new home in Aspen. What about the working class? So
I read that.
I'm sure you saw that. And so let's, first of all, just go ahead and, does he have a legitimate position as asking what a mayor would do for the working class? Is that a legitimate question?
Well, first of all, Sam, whom I don't know personally, I do know indirectly because he has posted some comments on some of the things I've written in the Aspen Times, where they have the online comment opportunity. And he's always been, it's been an infrequent thing, but I don't recall he's ever been disrespectful, but challenging, as I take this.
Yeah,
here.
I don't think it was a bad letter, Sam. I think it was good. A good question.
And when I read that, I didn't take it as a, what are you going to do for me kind of letter, even though that's sort of what he says. I try to think what's behind it. I think about the frustration that this reflects. To me, this reflects frustration from people who have a hard time making ends meet and living in this town. It's just not possible to do on a limited income. That's why we have affordable housing. That's why we do some tax rebates for food purchases. That's why we try to make sure we have a few affordable restaurants in town all the time, and so on and so on. Have extensive recreational facilities that are affordable by working people who live on very limited incomes. But even with all those benefits, still there's some frustration on some people's parts. So as someone thinking about trying to serve the city as a public official, I read that and thought, okay, well, there must be some unmet needs and there must be some things we need to do that we're not doing. And I hope that if I'm elected, that Sam will come have coffee with me, or even before, or if I'm not elected, have coffee with me. Tell me specifically, like, why are you frustrated by that? I don't take that as a jealous letter. You're a guy who's been able to retire to Aspen, you have your own home, all that. I don't take that as jealous. I take it as frustrated, like, how can I get to where you are?
And I think Sam has a legitimate concern here. And the way I would understand Sam's concern is, the town is configured, and I believe, and I've said this over more than 20 years, the town is configured with our affordable housing program. It basically functions as the company store. And our politicians have engineered a system, like it or not, that allows someone to come here and have a place to live, but in essence creates a Faustian bargain where they become trapped. Just like he says, he can probably never buy a home in Aspen or an apartment or anything. And so part of that problem we created by making it so restrictive to be able to develop here. We put so much mitigation and everything else on every bit of construction and everything, you limit every square foot, which we understand the reason that's done. But the flip side that the average local doesn't really understand or doesn't think about, it sounds great, we're not going to let these rich people put another 2 feet on their house. The flip side is you're never going to get a house because it makes that other 400 feet so expensive that you're never going to get it, and you're going to be working at the company store. And the reason I know about this, Maurice, I grew up in affordable housing, okay? My dad came back from the war, 1946, 47. There were no places for people to live. There's millions of GIs returning to America. Everything was expensive, okay? And the government, in their government largesse, built veterans housing where we moved in. You could buy it relatively cheaply, but you didn't get any appreciation.
Right.
So 50 years later, for 50 years, I had to hear my mother say, if only we had bought free market, okay? Because prices were going up and going up, and we were trapped in the Greek sparing gifts concept. So I have an idea, I'm going to throw it out now, which I've bandied about before, to help people like Sam, that if someone lives in Aspen for 10 or 20 years, that their deed restriction should decrease over time, so that ultimately if they sell it, they can get a better portion of appreciation. I think they'll maintain it better. I think we'll eliminate a lot of problems. Just create a blended free market kind of unit. Because right now, what Mick and the other affordable housing proponents have done is created the illusion of home ownership, but not real home ownership. So I want to hear your opinion about creative ideas to help someone like Sam own something.
Okay, well, first of all, back to Sam a little bit, because not knowing Sam, I don't know whether Sam's 60 years old or he's 20 years old. But if he's on the younger side, hopefully he's going to have a lot of opportunity. I didn't own a home when I was 20. I didn't own a home when I was 25. I probably didn't own my first home till I was about 35. So hopefully Sam's got time to increase his income and get involved in buying this or that, whether it's free market, whether it's affordable. So I hope Sam will be able to do that. And in fact, if Sam is on the younger side, I'd be happy to give him any advice I could give that might be helpful to him. Now back to the broader issue. The idea that you just threw out, I think, is actually a general concept that has been adopted by some other communities. And in a nutshell, as you said, it's to allow people to realize more appreciation in their affordable housing units, but also not quite as much as they would have if they'd been in free market. Well, they're not taking the risk that those in free market take, so maybe they shouldn't have as much upside. And as I think you've suggested, it should be maybe scaled for the length of time that they've been in there.
Yeah, we don't want someone to make a windfall and live here for 2 years and then sell and make a... But if someone lives here for 20 or 30 years, shouldn't they be able to get some of that appreciation, not just 3% a year, which once inflation kicks in again, and it will at some point, that they're going to be, everything in the valley is going to be going up 8 and 10% a year, and they're going to be stuck at 3%. And the very people that this is my contention, the very people that we want to help, the Sams of the world, who needs a place to live in Aspen, we don't want to punish them for working hard in Aspen for a lifetime.
Now, I don't know whether Sam lives in affordable housing now or not, but I do know the people who are in affordable housing have a problem right now in a down market. And the problem is they have a lot of difficulty selling their units. If they want to sell, they want to move to a different unit in affordable housing, they want to move into free market, they want to move away because they can't make a living here anymore, or whatever the personal situation is. It's very difficult to sell units now.
Because of the economy.
Well, part of it is the economy, but remember this, it's all supply and demand, okay? There is a certain supply of affordable housing which is subsidized, therefore you can buy it if you qualify below what you'd have to pay for something comparable in the free market. Of course now, there's so much good free market housing available in Basalt or Carbondale or other places down
the
valley.
highway has changed everything. Highway 82 has changed everything.
So there's competition, and some people are, when they have a choice, could I buy into affordable? No, I think I'll just buy near Basalt or Emma or someplace, and there I'll have an upside potential. Here I don't even have an upside potential that means anything. So I have a longer commute, but it's all trade-offs. And people are making those decisions. But the point is, that's competition for affordable housing sales.
It absolutely, all of Willits and everything became, and it's beautiful down there, became competition where someone could buy a free market unit and then, hopefully get some appreciation and build a family there. That in Aspen, it's just really hard to do. The other thing about being a homeowner is that it implies certain things, like you have to maintain the home, okay? And some of our affordable housing, for whatever reason, has deteriorated. And our system is promoting a deteriorating housing stock, okay? So how could we deal with that unless we have some incentives, because everybody responds to incentives.
Yeah, of course
incentives for people to invest in their unit. If you know you're not even going to get your money out at the end, why would you keep it up?
Well, Jerry, we have housing frontiers, and we have the city of Aspen, we have the county, we have a lot of people who've studied all of these problems with affordable housing for years. I don't think there's a single problem with affordable housing, including the ones that you've just talked about, that haven't been studied to death by one or more of those groups that have focused on affordable housing. And they've all come up with perfectly reasonable solutions. alternative solutions. The problem is not that we don't know what we can do. The problem is we don't do it. Our answer to everything on affordable housing is build more units, build more units. And that's exactly the wrong thing to be doing now, because we're creating more supply, competing with the existing units, locking in the people who are in the existing units even more so, making it harder for them to sell units. The city's promoting the hell out of Burlingame too, because they're having a hard time attracting serious interest in it. They're making it very, very easy for people to sort of reserve units there. And they're doing everything they can to complete the project. I brought here a couple of pages out of the city budget. And here's the Housing Development Fund budget for 2013. They plan to spend $17.8 million this year as a further investment in Burlingame too. And that it says $10.5 million spent in 2012. Cumulatively, $31 million through 2013. Now, I'm not saying that isn't the right number or there's something wrong with that, but that's a lot of money to put into a project that's simply going to compete with existing housing stock of 2,000 some odd units. And nobody stops to look at it and think, okay, do we really need this? Is this the best way to deal with all our challenges? Just keep building more units. At some point, we need to get rational about
Well,
this.
you know that I've always maintained that each one of these new units becomes a new voter that will. I just can tell you right off the bat, it's impossible for anybody to get elected in Aspen if they're against affordable housing.
And I think affordable housing is a community asset.
So do I.
It results in our more diverse community. It's terrific.
But it's just not done intelligently. And I'm not faulting any specific person. I just think there's a better way to do it. Like giving people more upside, as I suggested. Like instead of building more units this year, maybe we should use the community funds to upgrade the units we have and make them beautiful.
Well, let's take there's an example, a very specific example relating to that. We know there's a dispute over the siding and sidewalks and some other things at Burlingame Ranch. In fact, this morning I was out there visiting with some people at Burlingame Ranch.
There's a legal dispute.
And look, there's a lawsuit. I mean, it's a lawsuit. The Homeowners Association has sued.
Who are they suing?
I think they've sued, I haven't looked at the complaint, but from what I've read, they sued the construction company. They sued the supplier of the siding, and they've sued the city. And I am not familiar with the lawsuit, so I can't tell you what the grounds are. But that's what they always do. They sue everybody. Yeah, they always
figure it out.
They always
later.
sue everybody.
Yeah.
And I've actually asked, how much are they asking for? Because there are lawsuits and there are lawsuits, and I don't think that so far it's been quantified how much they think would be needed to fix that. And I'm not advocating that the city take on the responsibility of going around and fixing everything that needs to be done in projects that it got started that are now the responsibility of homeowners associations and others.
There is a homeowners association.
There is a homeowners association. They are responsible for it.
It sounds like they have a claim against the contractor, though, if this is a relatively
as a lawyer, I'm very cautious
Yeah.
to say they do or don't have a claim against that, but they have sued them. That's all I know. It'll be up to the court to decide, do they really have a claim, and if so, how much. But where I'm going with this, Jerry, is here's $17.8 million that we plan to spend building more units to compete with the existing units. I don't know how much it would cost to fix the problems at Burlingame Ranch, and I'm not suggesting, as I said, the city ought to jump in and fix them. But would it be a more intelligent use of public funds just to keep building more units, or would it be a more intelligent use to see whether we could use some small part of those funds to help resolve the dispute? It may be that there is shared responsibility here. So we should think about, that's a little example. Think out of the box. Think about how we can really help the affordable housing stock we have and move the program onto a more intelligent path forward.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing that we should talk about our budget, $106 million.
Yeah.
Okay, and small unmarked bills.
Right.
Okay,
right.
So someone told me this once, I don't know if this is true or not, and it may be apocryphal. Someone told me like Glenwood Springs has like 6,000 people just like Aspen, and their budget is like $8 million or something.
Well, I don't know what their budget is, but it's a hell of a lot less than ours.
But it's not, it could be a factor of 10 or 15.
Yes.
And as far as I know, they have police, they have the volunteer fire, they have all the same stuff. Why do we spend? Well, I'll give you my theory.
Yeah.
We spend money because we can.
Okay.
And it's not ours. It's the
Okay.
second
Yeah.
homeowners, let's be honest.
Right. Okay. I believe that's true, but I think that's not the only reason. First of all, Glenwood Springs is not a magnet for tourists, and our population balloons during the high seasons. So we have to have infrastructure to support not only the permanent population, but also the temporary population that balloons from time to time. And I don't know how much that costs, but that costs more than just operating a town of our size with a static year-round population. So that is part of it. I suspect it's a small part of it. I suspect the larger part is what you put your finger on, that is, we have it, so we spend it. Now, we do have to spend money on affordable housing, and we have. We've spent a lot of it. That Glenwood Springs may not need to, because it's just not as expensive to live there or even down valley from their Rifle or whatever and have a job in Glenwood Springs. But here we have a more acute need to spend some money to have affordable housing here in Aspen for our workforce. So that's another reason why our budget might be larger. But again, I think a large part of it is we just have it, so we spend it. Now here's a little tiny example. I said, you know, this is really, it's very picayune, but it makes the point. Don Taylor is our finance director in the city. He does a great job. Very competent, great guy. Very cooperative. Every time I've asked him for information, he gives it readily. He's a good guy. He puts together a terrific budget. He gets an award every year for what a great budget it is. But it's populated, you know, with all these graphics, you know, what a beautiful town. This is a budget. This is just supposed to be numbers and a little explanation, 630 pages of it. So are we spending money to have the graphics that really don't do anybody any good just because we have it? And if we are, how many other examples of that are there in the way we're spending money in our city government? And it's not their money, so they might as well.
Right, you know, it's interesting. Years ago, I mean, this goes back 10 or 15 years ago, the town was booming, the Hollywood years, just everything was flying. We were collecting money like crazy, housing was selling, and I saw that we should maybe do something for a rainy day. I foresaw what happened after 9/11 and then again after 2008. And I said, why don't we have all this money? Why can't we get bank some of it for a rainy day so we don't have to fire employees? Yeah. Everybody looked at me like, no, just spend it all. Yeah.
Okay, well, part of that is just the way city governments account for things. It's as simple as that is part of it. And I learned this from being on the Citizens Budget Task Force 5 years ago. All governmental units budget year by year, and it's unusual to do long-range budgeting. The base theory is we'll collect it in taxes and then we'll spend it. And then next year we've got more collections and more spending. And there is very little thought given to long-range planning. It's especially needed in capital projects. But projections are made that, yes, because of the tax revenue flows, we should be able to. And if we float bonds and whatever, I'm not saying that the finances have not been thought through. They have been thought through. But there is this year-by-year mentality, and that's part of it. Another part of it, look at this. I can't explain this, Jerry. Again, going back to the Housing Development Fund, this is the fund from which we would build more affordable housing. Going back to 2009, at the end of each year, we've had at least $3.5 million in the fund. We had as much as $12.7 million at the end of 2011. You know what the plan is this year? The end of this year, we'll have $29,707 in the fund.
What happened to that surplus?
It's all going to be blown on Burlingame 2, right here. That's the number.
And
right
do you understand what the subsidies are per unit in that? Have you looked at those numbers?
I have, but I don't have
hundreds of thousands of dollars. The taxpayers are subsidizing hundreds of thousands of dollars per unit.
Right.
To build that.
Right. And
you wonder whether we're really getting the bang for our buck there.
Well, it brings up, for example, the make or buy decision. So if we have a system that locks people in and makes it difficult for them to turn over their units when they want to, and at the same time we're going over here spending $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 to build a new unit, and we have no means of helping these people turn over their unit, sell it back to the city or what have you, so the city can recycle the unit, that's a big mistake because we're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars more, if not millions cumulatively, building more stock, and ignoring the fact that we could actually be recycling the existing stock.
Yeah, in medical school, we all learned that if a little of a medication is good, a lot is not necessarily better, okay?
Yes.
And that's the situation and I've seen some of your thoughtful letters on what is the correct number of affordable housing units to serve the employees and their families that live and work here. And what is that correct number? But nobody, it seems like the only correct number is more.
Yes, that's my point, yeah. It does seem like that. Now, there was a recent debate, it's, I guess, pending for the moment, over the amendment to the cash in lieu payments for mitigation of affordable housing. And the proposal that the city was considering was so extreme that it drew out of the woodwork a pretty good legal analysis from one developer's lawyer about, is it even legal what the city's doing now? Is there enough of a connection between the actual effect on the workforce of this or that development or change and what we need to spend to mitigate it? And that's a serious, not only legal question, but really an economic question.
Talk about Aspen's small town character. I think that's something that I love it. I don't want to see skyscrapers go up in Aspen. I'm sure that you like our character. But then how do you make that fit within the concept of the big new art museum that's going in? It's like a Chinese box or whatever. I mean, do you think our architectural controls are working, or is the system
No, they're not.
flawed?
They're not working.
All right,
they're not
explain
working.
to our viewers why.
Okay. The reason I think they're not working is because we don't have a comprehensive plan, and we don't stick to it. Now, all plans should always be reviewed and changed from time to time because conditions change. So you don't want to draw a plan for Aspen in 1950 and then still be trying to apply it in 2013. But we have zoning laws. They're well thought out. They say in this section of the city you can do this, in this section you can do that. We have height limitations, we have setbacks, we have all that stuff. Now, if they're not thought out well enough, then we need to go back and change the zoning ordinances and the rules and then say to people, these are the rules you want to develop here. You just have to fit into these rules, and that's it. And we don't need to have endless discussion. You come to us with plans that will fit in the rules. This will go through like that. We won't have a problem. But what happens now is we, of course, do have some very strict rules, and developers know from experience. I can come in with a proposal that doesn't meet the rules, and then I can hire lawyers, and I can hire architects, and I can hire engineers, and I can spend money and time trying to persuade city council they should grant me a variance. And it costs everybody a lot of time and money unnecessarily because the rules are honored more in the breach than anything else.
I know. I wrote a letter to the editor about that 20 years ago, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
It's like we should have one set of rules and they apply to everybody.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And but the reason that doesn't happen, because I'm always like, it's so logical. That
Right. So why isn't it happening?
Well, and the reason it doesn't happen because every time they grant a variance, it's a chance to have more mitigation for employee housing, and that's the push-pull. It's like the developers. Okay, I don't think they're greedy developers. I don't know any developers. They're not people that I hang out with. But the developers want to get their hand in the city's pocket, and the city wants to get their hand in the developer's pocket, and in the end, it becomes a big horse trading, and that's what happens. And instead of having one set of rules that would apply to everybody, and then we wouldn't have this. But you read every day in the paper, they're applying for a variance, they're applying for a height limit, they have a reason, they're going to give more of this, they're going to make it affordable, whatever it is, it's just nonsense.
Well, you know, one view of government, not just Aspen city government, but one view of government is that it's a racket that's in the business of making it difficult for you to get anything done and then selling you a favor to be an excuse from it. And when I say selling, I'm not talking about under the table, I'm not talking about anything illegal, I'm just talking about, okay, if you want us to waive the rule for you, then you have to do something for us.
Yeah, and that's basically emblematic of what happens in Washington every day.
Yeah.
And
it happens in the states. It happens all. It's politics.
In Washington, it happens with the tax code. So,
yes, right.
You know, if you want to do, you want this tax break, then you have to pay our lobbyist, and he's going to come. And at the end of the day, it's the root of all evil is our tax code, which has so many loopholes that you could drive an 18-wheeler through it.
Right.
And it's not effective. So who would you say you're not now? If you could look out at Aspen, and we have diverse populations of young workers, we have tourists, we have second homeowners. They can't vote, obviously. Who would you think your natural constituents might be?
My natural constituents, I think, are people who want to see us bring more rationality to the way we conduct local government. I don't have any, I'm not running on any particular substantive issue like we should do this specific thing for affordable housing or we should do this specific thing over here or there. I'm focused on how we run the government, and I think that it's not open enough to the people. Anyone who's concerned about how open we are as a city government to our citizens ought to be my natural constituent, because no one else seems to be paying any attention to it. Now, maybe no one else is paying attention to it because they're smarter than I am and they realize nobody cares. But so maybe I have two, or three natural constituents. But assuming that there are more than that, those are my natural constituents.
Yeah,
I think.
somebody
And I have supporters here who are very far left Democrats and very far right Republicans, and as most people who know me know, I'm a pretty conservative Republican. But this is not a partisan campaign, and in fact, the city council and mayor are expressly nonpartisan positions in this town,
and they should be.
City charter.
I've said that for years.
That's a very good thing. It's a very good thing.
But it's interesting, someone like Sam, okay, I would maintain, even though his implication is, well, you own a home in town, and how can you possibly relate to somebody like me who's a young guy starting out? My inference here is that he's a young working kid and
I'm
wants
assuming.
to, yeah. But someone like Sam, it's my contention, would benefit from some rational decisions made in government, because he's a citizen of this town,
right.
and it's not going to hurt him if the money is spent wisely and if it's spent thoughtfully and if it's not just thrown around because we can.
There's like usually 10% of the citizenry over here and 10% over here, maybe less, who are very vocal on issues, different sides of issues, and then there's the big middle of people who really don't have the time to get too involved. And therefore don't have the time really to study the issues and so forth. And in this town, we have a special problem that a lot of those people who haven't been speaking up don't do it because they feel that they might pay a price somehow. It's a small town. The city is a big employer.
Absolutely true.
And whether there is truth to it or not, the perception is clearly out there because people have talked to me about it. That, I'd like to say something, like when we were circulating our petition. I asked a friend, would you sign the petition? And she said, I would love to sign it, but we have a building permit application into the city. And she was dead serious.
Yeah.
And that's pretty typical. Now, if I'm mayor, we have some really good boards and commissions. If I'm mayor, I am going to propose to the council that we appoint a commission to study this problem and advise the council about what we should do, not to eliminate perception, but to determine how much reality is there and how can we eliminate it. And I'll look to the city manager to drive that out of city government. It would be his responsibility because the city manager is responsible for city administration. I want to get rid of that because we need the Sams of the world. Sam, more power to you. You spoke up. I want the Sams of the world to feel like they can come in and talk to council, send a letter, an email, a blog post, whatever, and never fear that it's going to have any repercussions to them.
One of my frustrations over the years has been there's been I don't know if this comes from the top down or it's just sort of trickles up, but there's been a feeling in town that the locals and the second homeowners are somehow adversarial, and that the tourists are like coming in and interfering with everybody's, private, quiet space. And I just think that those people who feel that way, and it's not an uncommon thing in Aspen, are on Pluto, which isn't even a planet anymore.
Right.
because we need all these groups to function effectively in Aspen. If it were just locals, it would just be a completely different town. We wouldn't have all the things we have.
Well, that's right.
So would you, as a mayor, be respectful of tourist and second homeowners? I mean, do you think they have a place at the table, or?
I think they ought to have a vote, frankly. I think they ought to have a vote on almost anything in town, and certainly anything that affects their taxation. They don't have any vote on
right
any
now
matter.
we don't. Are there? I think there are some communities that have asked.
There are some, and I think we had a proposal on the ballot a few years ago to extend the right to vote to homeowners on matters that affected their property taxation, and it failed. Now,
well, you can see why. It
well,
failed,
I understand why
yeah.
it failed. But sure, I understand why it failed, but that doesn't mean I don't think it was a good idea. Yes, we do need ways to bridge that gap. We're never going to eliminate it entirely, because there are people who are here year-round and they're long-time locals, and some of them do feel like, you know, I'm in a different class from these people. I have interests that are different from them. They don't understand me. That's society. You can't eliminate it completely, but it's not healthy, and we should try to reduce it. I agree with you.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So, what's the worst mistake you ever made in your life? I want to hear. I know you did something that you thought was stupid now, Maurice. So think of something to tell us that where you really screwed up.
Yeah. I didn't ask my wife to marry me soon enough.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
How'd you meet her?
Oh, it's a great story.
All right. Go for it.
Okay. Yeah. So when my wife was maybe 3 or 4 years old, we both grew up in Oklahoma City, but our families knew each other, but we were not acquainted with each other. Do you know Purim? You know the
Yes,
carnival
I do know
Purim?
Purim.
Okay, it's a Jewish festival, and the kids dress up as the characters in the story on which the festival is based. So my wife Jamie was Queen Esther. Lots of the girls want to be Queen Esther because she's the heroine of the story. And her mom asked my mom to give her a ride home from the Purim carnival. I was in the car. I don't remember this, but my mother never let my wife forget that my wife ate too much chazarai. You know the term. It means junk food.
and chazarai.
It means junk food. And she got sick in the back of my mother's brand new Buick.
How old were you then?
Oh, I was probably 6 and she was probably 4.
It's a beautiful story.
That's how we met. And then we actually didn't meet again until we were out of college.
And you went to school in Oklahoma?
I went to college in Philadelphia. She went to college in Chicago.
Oh, it's funny because I was sitting on the plane, talking about Oklahoma City. I'm sitting on the plane coming from Florida back to Aspen, to Denver actually, changed, a couple days ago. And a guy sitting next to me, good-looking young kid, you know, and looked like an investment banker. And I said, well, where are you from? He said, well, I was born in Oklahoma City. Okay. And I said, why are you coming to Denver? He said, well, I just got transferred. I have a new job. Oh, that's very nice, you know. And then someone comes over to me, 2 hours, it's a 4-hour flight, 2 hours to the flight. Said, that's Wes Welker, the receiver that just got traded from New England. But he was very understated, very nice kid.
Well, that's an Okie for you.
Yeah, there you go. He's just a regular guy.
Right.
So you're involved in the film festival. What's the deal there?
I've been on the board of Aspen Film for a year and a half or 2 years, and I'm treasurer of the organization. And it's a great organization, and we have those wonderful festivals. Film Fest, Shorts Fest is coming up shortly. We have Academy screenings in the fall, and it's a wonderful, wonderful organization.
And how is that funded? Is that a nonprofit?
It's a nonprofit. It is funded about a third by ticket sales, about a third by memberships, and about a third by donations, by fundraising.
Did you see any movies you liked lately? Anything you
Lincoln,
yeah. Lincoln was good.
Yeah, I thought
he was
Lincoln
amazing,
was
but he didn't win the Academy Award for it, did he?
No, I think he did.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, I think he did.
He was amazing. That was pretty predictable when you watched it.
Yeah. No, that was a great film. I think that Spielberg has made a small number of classic films that will be they'll be classics forever. And Lincoln looked to me like one of those. You know, very historic, very factual. So well produced, etc. Saving Private Ryan would be another one.
Did you see Quentin Tarantino's movie, Django Unchained?
I haven't seen it yet, but we watched Kill Bill 1 and 2 the other night. And my wife does not like violent movies too much, but she was riveted at Kill Bill.
So as we get closer to the end of this show, what's the one, if you could say, the biggest problem that we face in Aspen that our government, whether it's you or Tori or Adam or any of the people who are running, what's the biggest problem that they should start out and address?
The way we conduct the business of city council and the business of city manager and the business of city attorney. Because in our structure, in the charter, those three report to the city council. City council is responsible for supervising them, and they are not to be political positions. The city attorney is not to be a political position. City manager is not a political position.
Well, Jim True now, was he an appointee, or how did he get that
yeah,
job?
They're hired. I mean,
Yeah.
these are our city employees, and Jim was the assistant city attorney under John Worcester, and he's very experienced, a very good, thoughtful lawyer. But I don't believe that the current members of council, other than possibly Mick, because he does have the background, and one thing about Mick is he always does his homework and he always knows his facts. And
Mick's a hard worker.
He has a lot of good qualities. He understands it, but I'm not satisfied he has led the others in the direction that it should be led. It's been led far away from the charter, where I look at city council meetings, and I read the charter, and it says the city manager is supposed to advise the city council. City manager is supposed to run the administration. City manager, city manager. Now, he's over here in the peanut gallery at most of the city council meetings. He's relegated physically.
Steve Barwick.
Steve Barwick.
Yeah.
And I think that's horrible, because he ought to be front and center in front of city council. And when there's a proposal, he should be the person making the proposal with the support of staff and so forth. And it should be between the city council and Steve, because that's what he's there for. They don't let him do his job.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, I want to thank you for coming on the show, Maurice. This hour went fast. You're a very thoughtful, engaging candidate. Probably too normal for Aspen. But
well,
you
we'll
never
see.
know.
We'll see.
I remember the only thing I'm going to warn you as we get closer into the campaign is that Tim Semro once said, "In Aspen, politics is a blood sport."
Yes. Thank you very much, Jerry. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. Make sure you get out and vote, and we will see you next week.
Support for this Grassroots community television program comes from U.S. Trust. From wealth structuring to investment management, U.S. Trust's global perspective, unique team approach, fiduciary platform, and more than 200 years of experience provide for the kind of insights, solutions, and expertise that have a worth all their own.
Bishop Plumbing and Air Conditioning, serving Aspen and Vale for over 40 years. Shoe covers, name tags, IDs. Let Bishop worry about your heating, plumbing, and air conditioning issues so that you don't have to. Bishop Plumbing and Air Conditioning, 925-8610.
Vivino Law Firm, a boutique law firm specializing in complex litigation, real estate, leasing, and sales, corporate organization, trust, and estates. Admitted in Colorado, California, and New York. David Bovino and Summer Woodson at 970-925-4445 or www.bovinolaw.com.